I never planned to fall in love with the man who signed my paychecks. I never planned to fall in love with anyone again, actually. Not after what happened 3 years ago, but some nights, life doesn't ask you what you planned. It just happens, and you're left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out how you got there. My name is Elena Marsh, and I was 26 years old when my world fell apart for the second time. The first time was when my fiancé left me 2 weeks before our wedding, the moment he found out I was pregnant. He said he wasn't ready. He said a lot of things that night, standing in my kitchen with his coat already on, like he'd rehearsed his exit before he even walked in the door. I never saw him again after that. Not once. Not even a phone call to ask about the son he left behind. I raised Noah alone. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads. My parents helped when they could, but they had their own bills, their own lives. So most nights, it was just me and my baby boy, and a stack of unpaid invoices on the kitchen table that seemed to grow taller every week. That night, the night everything changed again, I was walking home from my second job at 11:30, cutting through an alley I knew I shouldn't have been cutting through, because the bus fare and the shortcut savings mattered more to me than they should have. 3 men followed me from the parking lot. I didn't even hear them until it was too late to run. I remember the cold brick against my back. I remember trying to scream and nothing coming out. And then headlights, a car braking hard, a man's voice, low and furious, telling them to get away from me or he'd make sure they regretted it. I didn't know his face yet. I only knew his voice, and the way my body finally let itself shake once the men had scattered into the dark. He drove me home that night. He didn't ask for my number. He didn't ask for anything. He just made sure I got inside safely, made sure Noah was asleep in his crib, and left his card on my kitchen counter in case I needed anything. I remember staring at that card for a long time before I finally looked at the name printed on it. Damon Cole, CEO, Cole Industries. I laughed, actually laughed, alone in my kitchen at midnight. Because of course the man who saved my life was the same man whose company logo I saw every single day, on the building where I worked as an administrative assistant 3 floors below his office. I had passed him in the lobby 100 times. I had never once looked up long enough to really see his face. Monday morning, I walked into work exhausted, bruised on the arm where one of those men had grabbed me, and trying to act like nothing had happened. And then the elevator doors opened, and there he was, Damon Cole, my boss's boss's boss. The man who had pulled 3 attackers off of me 2 nights before. He looked at me like he recognized me immediately, and something in his expression softened in a way I hadn't expected from a man whose reputation in that building was, frankly, terrifying. Ruthless in negotiations. Cold in meetings. The kind of man employees whispered about, never to his face. But the man in that elevator wasn't cold at all. He asked if I was all right. He asked if I'd gone to the police. He asked quietly, almost like he was afraid of the answer, if there was anyone at home waiting for me. I told him about Noah. I don't know why. Something about him made it easy to be honest, even though every instinct I had told me to keep my head down and get through the day like I always did. What I didn't expect was for him to ask to meet him. It happened slowly after that. He'd stop by my desk on his way to meetings, not to check on reports, but to ask how Noah's cold was doing, whether the daycare had called back, whether I'd slept. Small things, human things, the kind of attention nobody had paid me in 3 years. I told myself it was nothing. He was just a decent man doing a decent thing, and I was a single mother who hadn't been looked at with real kindness in longer than I wanted to admit. I told myself that right up until the night he came to pick up a forgotten folder from my apartment, and Noah ran straight into his legs, babbling some nonsense about a toy truck, and Damon knelt down without hesitating and listened like it was the most important conversation he'd have all week. I watched him with my son that night and felt something crack open in my chest that I had sealed shut a long time ago. It was 3 weeks later, over coffee he'd insisted on making in my tiny kitchen, because he refused to let me serve him, that he finally asked to see Noah's baby photos. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because some part of me trusted him more than I understood at the time. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the hospital photo, the one from the day Noah was born, and Damon went completely still. He asked me Noah's birthday. His exact tone had changed, gone quiet, careful. I told him, confused by the sudden shift in his face. He set his coffee down. His hands weren't quite steady. And then he told me something that turned my entire understanding of my own life upside down. 3 years ago, before he became CEO, before coal industries, before any of it, he had donated to a fertility clinic during a difficult period in his life, believing his information would remain permanently sealed and anonymous. I felt the room tilt. Because 3 years ago, desperate and alone after my fiancé's betrayal, left me questioning whether I even wanted another relationship, I had used that same clinic. Not for the reason people assumed. Not out of desperation for a child from nowhere. My fiancé and I had struggled to conceive naturally for over a year before that final fight. And in a decision I'd made completely on my own after he walked out. One I never fully explained to anyone, not even my parents. I had gone through with a donor procedure I'd already started before he left. Damon's hands were shaking as he asked to see Noah again. Not out of suspicion, out of something that looked, unmistakably, like hope colliding head-on with disbelief. The DNA test came back 2 weeks later, 99.9%. Damon Cole, the CEO who pulled 3 strangers off me in a dark alley, who I had fallen for slowly and quietly without ever letting myself admit it, was Noah's biological father. I won't pretend the weeks after that were simple. There were lawyers, careful conversations, moments where I genuinely feared he might try to use his money and power to take my son from me, the way people in my position always fear. But that fear never became real. Instead, he showed up. Every single day, at every appointment, every daycare pickup, every scraped knee and midnight fever. He showed up like a man who had been given a second chance he never thought he'd get. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning with Noah asleep between us on the couch, Damon told me he didn't want to just be Noah's father living in the same city. He wanted to be part of both our lives, permanently, if I would let him. I said yes. Not because he was a CEO, not because of the alley or the rescue, or any fairy tale version of how this began. I said yes because I had watched him kneel on my kitchen floor to listen to a toddler talk about a toy truck. And I knew in that moment exactly what kind of man he really was. Some people say I got saved twice. Once from 3 strangers in an alley, and once from a life I thought I'd have to live alone forever. But the truth is, Damon says I saved him too. Because before that night, he says, he didn't know what he was missing. He just didn't know its name was Noah. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe some things really do happen for a reason, stay with me. I've got more stories like this one coming. I've got